This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
So what is the strangest place you found inspiration? Now, I'm not talking about where, and no, the bathroom is not that strange, at least not for me. Now, Walt Disney was fond of saying, without inspiration, we would perish. I'm Phil McKinney, and you're listening to Killer Innovations. Rather than a typical tech guest, today's guest comes from the art world. I got introduced to Noah Scallon through his art projects and his online kind of sites that I got introduced to by some friends. And I ended up writing a blog post about Noah and some of his projects a while ago. And actually, as a result of that, Noah reached out to me and we got introduced. We spent some time on the phone, and I've even gotten more into the work that he's doing, not only in his art projects, but also what he does outside of his direct art project. So this week, I want to welcome Noah. And hey, Noah, thanks for giving us some time here to join us on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So in 15 seconds, how do you introduce yourself to someone you just met?
Let's see. I'm an artist, an activist, an author, and a designer. That's 5 seconds, I think.
Yeah. Were you always an artist? Because, when I look, how I got introduced to you is primarily from your art projects and that. So is that where you got started at?
Yeah, both of my parents are artists, and so I think I'm one of those rare people who I knew I was an artist from day one because I grew up around art materials, always making art. In fact, when people would come over to my house when I was a kid, I'd say, let's go play in the studio, and they would look at me like, what's that? And I'd say, the room you make art. You've got one of those, right? And I had no idea that it wasn't as common as a kitchen or a dining room.
So, yeah, I could just imagine, every kid thinking that every house has a studio in it. So, when did you decide to make a career of it? It sounds like with your parents and you being raised up, it just almost became like the natural thing that you were just going to go do.
Well, I knew I wanted to use my creative skills to make a living, but actually because my parents both ended up having to do other things to make a living, I realized the fine art path wasn't going to be right for me. I was actually a really practical kid. So I actually went into the design world, originally theater design, as a means to be more practical, still not necessarily the most practical choice, but to be more practical about making a living, doing creative work where there was at least a job path. And right out of college, I ended up getting into graphic design.
So in the case of graphic design, things like posters and logo works, those types of things?
Yeah, I mostly focused on small businesses and nonprofits, but I did the whole gamut of marketing work, so everything from logos to brochures, postcards, mailers. I worked with a lot of theater companies because of my background in theater, and so I ended up doing a lot of really fun creative work around marketing plays in New York.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that. So in this case, though, you started off in doing that. Then what's been your career progression to date then?
Well, so I got, I did that for a very long time. I ended up getting out of school and going into the field, working for other people, doing in-house design for several years. And then I always wanted to run my own business, do freelance work. And so I ended up developing my business over the course of 6 years and then launched my own full-time company in 2001, just doing graphic design, marketing, branding work. And that's what I did for many, many years.
Yeah, and so one of the ways, the way that you and I got introduced is I'm a big believer in what I refer to as, constraint-based innovation, and that being around, forcing yourself to have to do a certain amount of work within certain kinds of constraints. And actually, in episode 13 of the podcast, I talked about this constraint-based innovation and mentioned you in some of your interesting projects that you kind of went off into to apply kind of a constraint model to actually kickstart your inspiration. So why don't you share a little bit about what led up to that effort?
Sure, yeah. So I've been doing this business, and I love doing graphic design. It was really passionate. I love being creative for a living. But after several years of it, I just realized I'd lost my joy around it. I just wasn't excited by the work I was getting. I wasn't advancing either. I wasn't getting more money. I wasn't getting more interesting work, bigger clients. It just sort of stagnated, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I was like, I need to do something else. I've got to do something to reinvigorate myself. And so I literally was just walking through a park one day in the midst of this moment of feeling really stuck, and had this vision, really, a thought came to me fully formed. I should make a skull every single day for a year.
Okay, so this is the one that just I can't get my head around. What inspired you that a skull was a good idea?
Right, I know, it sounds totally crazy, and the only thing I could say is that everybody has weird thoughts going through their head all the time. It's this, I think most people ignore them, and as an artist, as a creative person, I can sometimes embrace those and grab them. And it was really just, I happen to like skulls. It's one of the many things that I find interesting. Because I grew up as an artist, I grew up around anatomical imagery. I liked pirates, I liked archaeology, I liked biology, and so it was just a thing I happened to like. And I really, one of the things I learned from doing the project was that it's important to trust your gut, and that if something just appeals to you and you have some passion around it, that's the thing to go for, rather than being like, what do you think the world will like? I just happen to like skulls. It turns out, when I put them out to the world liked them as well.
Yeah, so this fully formed idea that you should do a skull a day, that was just for yourself, though. There wasn't really this intent, like you said, to meet some kind of market need or market demand.
Absolutely. It was purely just so that I was creating my own work, that I wasn't beholden to a client every day, make something I wanted to make, and see if I could do it. Push myself really with this challenge of making something in a single day. And then I also decided to do different materials every day. So I was really pushing myself, like challenging, okay, let me get through all the skills I know how to do, and let me get into the realm of the unknown, the realm of the unexpected, and see where it takes me. But it really was for myself. And what was crazy was that really within 2 weeks it went viral. And so suddenly the entire world, or what felt like the entire world, was watching, and thousands of people were checking in every day saying, "Where's your skull today, Noah?"
So it's all of a sudden you have thousands of people looking over your shoulder, either encouraging you or judging, right?
Yeah, and that was terrifying, but basically all the really good stuff that came out of the project came because, in fact, I shared it with other people and didn't keep it to myself, because I just got such an amazing response and this audience that just grew and grew. And even though the project was years and years ago, I still have a following that's growing continually. I like to say I'm in Skull a Day 9.0 now, basically.
And so this whole thing just went viral. And as a result, though, you've kind of got into a lot of different other areas. So we're going to cover that upcoming in this next segment, so stay right where you're at. If people want to follow you, what's the best place where they can find you?
If they'd like to see my own work, it's at noahscalin.com. You can see the Skull a Day project at skulladay.com. So
we're not done. You'll want to hear the rest of what Noah has done kind of post his Skull a Day project. So stay right there. I'm Phil McKinney, and you're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Many people think that the tricks, tools, or approaches from other industries cannot apply to what they are doing, and that somehow we're all unique and we're all special. Hogwash, and that's probably the nicest word I can say on national radio. Listen closely and see what you can learn from Noah and his work on how he found his inspiration in the art world, and how sometimes even in the innovation and creative space, we all go through that dry spell. And sometimes we just kind of need to kickstart ourselves to get ourselves going again. We all run through it, but I think what you can learn here from listening to Noah is really finding that way to do your own special projects to help you get kickstarted. So let's pick up where we left off. You had success with the Skull a Day. Then what happened?
Well, what was interesting is that I suddenly started getting asked to talk about my work, to publish books about my work. And, at first it was this sort of craft art audience that was interested, mainstream audience, but then suddenly businesses got interested, and I was asked to start talking to the clients of innovation companies. And I had no idea how what I was doing as an artist would apply, even as a designer in the commercial world. And so I sat and listened to them couching the stuff I was saying, and I was like, oh, look at this validity to the work I learned as an artist, applying to people in businesses of all industries. And so that slowly led to me going out and working directly with clients, and I now have a new consulting firm where I work with corporate clients all over the world about creativity and innovation, but rooted in the tools that artists use to keep themselves innovative and creative on a regular basis.
So yeah, and if I look at your the list of customers, it's everything from Fortune 50 companies and across a wide range of industries. So do you think your message then is resonating with them, or is it, do you get the feedback that it's actually engaging with them on this, that they're actually taking it to heart?
Absolutely. The amazing thing is over the last 5 years of working with one of my companies, I've watched them come closer and closer to what I've been teaching rather than, me moving towards them. It's recognizing that they see a real need for this. Everybody, when I ask in a room these days, do you think you need creativity in your work? Is it a necessity? Regardless of industry, every hand just about in the room goes up. Of course, the other side is I go, do you think you're creative? And very few hands go up. And so there's a huge gap right now. And companies, I think the ones that are smart are recognizing this is what they need to stay ahead of the game if they want to be successful in a really volatile market. So I'm guessing that the listeners now are sitting at the edge of their seats wanting to know. So what are the 3 lessons that our listeners can apply to themselves to be more creative? Bundling up what you learned and what you share with your consulting clients. What are those 3 lessons? Sure. It's a tough one because I cover a lot of stuff, but I would say the ones that really resonate or cause the most sort of thought from people are, well, the first one I'll say is give things away. It's a really terrifying statement. I think people understand it if they work in the tech industry because they know about open source, but I'm talking about bigger thing too, because a lot of stuff is secret, projects that people don't share, think that they're going to be really great if they just hold on to them, and what it turns out is that the more that you open up yourselves to other people, and that can be just with collaborating internally, the more likely you are to find really more interesting new solutions than just thinking you're going to do it on your own and keeping it to yourself.
Great. And that's actually one that I've learned because, I can't tell you how many times I get people wanting me to sign a non-disclosure agreement before talking about the idea. And what I've learned in my career is the value is not in the idea, the value is in the execution. Right? You want to differentiate yourself. It's not about just having an idea in your notebook. You got to get there and do it. So what's number 2 then?
Number 2, I would say, is perfection is overrated. I'm a perfectionist. This is a terrible project for a perfectionist to do. It's really about making more snowballs is the term I use. Really this idea about the more things you put out there, the more likely you are to get a creative avalanche, a real innovative solution. And it's not about perfecting everything you're creating, but it's really hard for people. I know especially in the tech industry, people want to be perfect about everything they do, and it can really stifle your creativity. I think some people know the phrase, great is the enemy of good, and I think that's another way to think of that.
Yeah, well, in this case, I probably people who've worked for me over the years will resonate with my one quote that I constantly have to remind even myself on, that there comes a time in a life of a product where you have to shoot the engineer and ship it. Because we will tweak it and polish it and, one more thing or one little issue left. But in some cases, you just got to get out there and not let that perfectionist attitude take over. So, yeah, I think that's a great one. Well, one that I need to listen to more often. I'm actually writing myself a note here. So,
it's a hard one
what's
to learn.
Number 3? It's impossible. It's very tough to learn. And I think for those people of us, particularly in the tech field, it just comes natural to us. So,
yeah.
What about number 3?
It's about practice. Number 3, I think a lot of people know the phrase "ask forgiveness" rather than "ask permission." This is almost the opposite of that, because I think the reality is there's a lot of times that people aren't asking questions. They're really assuming that things are going to happen a certain way. Oh, these are the rules. It must be this way. And so I'm really advocating for people to ask the unasked question. What's the question right now in your mind that you've been avoiding asking because you just figure, well, I know the answer is no, so I'm not going to bother? What's the thing that you've been afraid to ask because you don't want to look like a fool? One of those is going to be the one that makes a big difference for you.
Yeah, no, and you're speaking to an audience here that over the last 11 years has all been about, what are those questions and how do you ask questions that cause you to kind of look at the problem a different way. And out of that, when you tell people to ask questions, is there a favorite question that come up that was kind of surprising to you that was like, holy smokes, I didn't think of that?
Yeah. Wow, that's a tough one. I think a lot of times people are asking me about how this stuff applies, and they're just saying, well, I don't think I'm creative, and I don't see how this could apply to what I do. I'm an engineer. I've talked to people who are building planes. I've talked to people who are working in energy. And so it's, when they're sort of asking that sort of generalized question, like, well, what's the point of how does skulls relate to me? I'm kind of shocked because I'm saying, look, your bosses had me come here to talk to you. Clearly there's a value. But what's great is by the end they see it and then it resonates. But for me, it's about not only sharing with a story of what I do as an artist, but getting people to try it themselves and practice it. And once they've done it and they've embodied it, they really recognize the value in it. And so we have a motto where we're basically saying, like, creativity is a practice. The idea that you've got to just do it, right? That's going to make the difference.
Yeah, well, again, you and I are on the same page on this. And part of it is you can read about it, you can listen to a radio show, you can listen to a podcast, you can take a Udemy course, whatever. But sitting back, listening, and reading is not going to get you there. You've got to get out there and just try it. Even if it's just for yourself in a little notebook you keep in your bedside stand where you're not going to show it to anybody. But you've got to get out there, like you say, and practice it. And it just, for me, it just seems like it's so... I can't get over the fact that how hard it is for people just to get out and just try it. There's just this huge fear. How do you get them over there just to get out there and just do it and try it?
It's incredibly daunting, and that's why really what I push for is to do very small actions. Try to pick the tiniest, most doable, easy thing you can imagine. Give yourself a very small amount of time to do it. Don't stress out about the perfection of it, and then it's about just doing it over and over and over. And actually, my company developed a thing we call the Creative Sprint, specifically to get companies trying things out on a daily basis over a 30-day period so they can see the results of it. And we just did a test launch in April, and we're about to launch officially in October. And even from the test launch, we saw amazing results from people just willing to try little teeny things. We even give the inspiration to try this, and it really makes a difference.
That's interesting because I think you're right. I think it is. If you can break it down into a small enough, if you can chunk it down, I guess is how I would refer to it, and get it so that's low risk. Try it out very quick, and it seems like you almost got to do, confidence building. Is that the right word? Confidence building for them?
Sure, I would say, because I think a lot of people are afraid and they don't want to show imperfect work or they don't want to try something they've never done before. I know that. I feel the same way. It's daunting to me, too. But the second that I do it, I discover the benefits of it because immediately you start getting great feedback. You feel good about completing a task. It allows you to get to other tasks, and all that stuff just builds and builds and builds. Yeah,
and I think that's the point. And at some point, then, it's almost like having training wheels on the bicycle, right? You get the little bit of the training wheels, then you run alongside, you hold on to the bike, and then eventually you let go, and then they're off on their own.
I think that's the right way to put it, because really it's about momentum. And what we found is that, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? And so it's the hardest thing is to get started. And so we're always talking about, like, what's the smallest thing? Because that's the thing. If you can get that rolling action, if you get that movement going, you can build on that.
So, Noah, if people want to follow what you're doing, how can they find you?
So you can check out my consultancy at anotherlimitedrebellion.com. And if people want to sign up for the Creative Sprint this October, it's at creativesprint.co.
Great. Noah, I really appreciate you taking the time and joining us. When we're back, I've got a killer question that's going to hack your brain. I'm Phil McKinney, and this is Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.